Time for the bottom line now. A wrap of the business news of the day. Corruption Watch says whistleblowing reports spiked during the first 5 months of this year, including the lockdown period. That's contained in its latest annual publication of the Analysis of Corruption Trends report. The report looks at reports of corruption received until the end of June this year. It highlights whistleblower allegations of corruption in the police services, municipal offices, schools, traffic and licensing centres and the health sector as well.
The report looks at corruption reports by province. It shows Gauteng leading the pack with 44% of claims, mainly from the city of Johannesburg. KwaZulu-Natal follows Gauteng with 13% of corruption reports. The province's figures largely come from eThekwini Metropolitan Municipality. The Western Cape province completes the top three, with the city of Cape Town contributing the highest in the province.
There's a lot of resources that go into these big metros. We need to understand that in Gauteng, for example, the population density is approximately 15 million now, if I'm not mistaken. And as people flock to these big cities, that means government is spending a lot more in these areas, and there's a lot more development as well from business and so on and so forth. So, there's likely to be a lot more corrupt activity occurring in these areas as well. So that's why, for example, you find that the city of Johannesburg has a lot of corruption cases, over 20% of cases. Same goes for city of Tshwane, Ekurhuleni, city of Cape Town, and eThekwini.
The report further finds the prevalence of corruption in the South African police service. It finds that small businesses, mostly informal traders, have their goods confiscated only to have them returned should the owners be willing to pay whatever amount of money is asked for.
31% of the cases speak about bribery, whilst 29% speak about abuse of power. And abuse of power includes what you've just mentioned in relation to how small businesses struggle or have their goods confiscated only for those business people to pay money to the police. And this happened mostly during the lockdown period, where police would go to communities, close down businesses, and then take their goods. And when business owners would fail to pay a bribe, then the police would actually end up selling the goods.
With corruption at the local level of government, it found that in municipal offices, the most prevalent form of corruption is the misappropriation of resources, which accounts for 35% of these corruption cases. It also points to a disturbing trend that has emerged during the COVID-19 crisis, which is the theft of food parcels.
This is one of those tragic realities of lockdown, but just in South Africa in general. My colleagues actually during that period would volunteer in communities, but and they would see some of these acts of corruption manifest, where you'd have councillors taking food parcels that are meant for community members, or actually selling some of these food parcels to community members.
On corruption in schools, the report says whistleblowers describe how principals, assisted by school governing body members, mismanage and steal funds meant for obtaining resources and buying supplies for the National Schools Nutrition Program. Another prevalent form of corruption is employment irregularities, which accounts for 17% of school corruption cases received. The report says teachers with fraudulent qualifications and certifications are employed and earning a salary commensurate with the illegitimate professionals. Lastly, the report says corruption in the health sector is among the trending areas of concern, accounting for 4% of reports of corruption received. It says whistleblowers purport that vacancies are designed to favor officials' preferred candidates.
And what we're seeing there is that there are issues with procurement, a lot of irregularities there, where in some instances we learned of a person heading a health facility insisting that his family members or friends should be the ones awarded tenders.
Diabosito, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Sure. All right, let's look at some important data out today. And this is a sign of a recovery in the local economy in the next 6 months. The Reserve Bank's composite leading business cycle indicator increased further by 2.6% on a month-to-month basis in July. And this, of course, looks ahead at predicted economic activities in months to come. Increases were recorded in 8 of the 10 available component time series, while the remaining 2 decreased. The largest positive contributors to the movement in the lead business cycle indicator were increases in the number of residential building plans approved. Business confidence has also improved. That was one of the largest positive contributors. The improvement in sentiment came as lockdown restrictions were lifted, allowing for more business activity. Commodity price index for South Africa's main export commodities was positive as well. Job ad space was one of the negative contributors, indicating weak job prospects in the South African economy. The Competition Commission has released a report titled Essential Food Pricing Monitoring. The report aims to understand the effect of the pandemic on various lockdown measures and the economic crisis on food markets in South Africa. This is in an effort rather to ensure prices for essential food products do not escalate at a time when low-income households are bearing the brunt of COVID-19 and the economic crisis. The Competition Authority has noted concern around the varying prices of fresh produce such as vegetables across different markets. Its report states that there might be evidence which suggests that poorer rural regions may be paying more for staple foods than those in urban areas. The report has also noted that even though wholesale prices have fallen, retail prices were very slow to follow. This could suggest that wholesale retail margins have not reduced to pre-COVID levels. The Competition Authority is of the view a further investigation might be necessary. All right, let's look at what's happening with cars. The automotive sector recorded a 25% decline for the year to date compared to the same time last year. That's not surprising. The automotive industry was in decline even before COVID-19. Economists say it will take a while now to get the sector back to its pre-lockdown levels. The automotive sector contributed 6.4% to the national GDP, or the total economic output, last year, and it is a critical player in the industrial and economic landscape of South Africa.
The automotive manufacturing sector, comprising of vehicle assembly and component manufacturing, provides jobs to more than 100,000 people. South Africa's automotive industry is export-orientated. Europe is the main trading partner, accounting for 64.3% of vehicle and component exports. The coronavirus lockdown hit the sector hard. New vehicle sales dropped by 29.7% in March compared to the same period in 2019. But the sector is picking up.
From an Isuzu perspective, despite the current downward trend in domestic vehicle sales in South Africa, we have performed better than expected in the market. Last month was our best Isuzu D-Max sales month in 14 years. On the truck side, our share of the medium and heavy commercial vehicle market, excluding van and bus, is currently tracking at almost 13% year to date. So far, we have retained our number one position in the segment of the market and plan to retain this position in 2020. These positive sales performances, despite the current downward trend in domestic vehicle sales in South Africa, can be attributed to the Isuzu team's agility, flexibility and resilience to proactively and positively respond to change.
The drop in new vehicle sales is putting the squeeze on dealerships. The smaller players are the hardest hit.
Of the companies that are struggling, unfortunately, is the small companies that are mainly owned, by black-owned businesses and so on and so forth. So our biggest priority now is to be able to assist as much as possible as we can those particular companies so that they can be able to restore their operations fully, because now most of the restrictions have now been lifted and they are now able to fully restore their services as much as possible as they can. Secondly, we are also looking at how best we can be able to stimulate demand for brand new cars in our country, because a lot of people are not buying cars, and we will certainly be talking to government so that we can be able to jointly look at alternatives so that we can really be able to stimulate demand for new vehicles. We've seen in many countries across the world where governments get involved in terms of assisting their own local manufacturers so that they can really be able to assist in making sure that demand for new vehicles is stimulated.
A total vehicle production target for this year was set at 650,000 vehicles before the pandemic hit. But the prediction is that it will fall short by a third of the target.
The automotive sector is not going to be easy because automotive sector has faced a double blow. It has faced a simultaneous shock of demand and supply, in the sense that there has been no output, that is the supply side, and there's been no demand. I mean, as figures are showing that right across the world, Europe, the US, around the world, China included, the demand for cars, for example, has dropped because of the loss of incomes, meaning that, there will be no demand for cars for a longer period since people lost their jobs. So to recover this sector is going to need a lot of work. And that is going to demand that work will have to focus on the macro level as well as a micro level. Macro level meaning that we need to focus on our GDP. As you know that a week ago, GDP figures were released and most of the sectors dropped by almost 10%. So we need a growing economy, that's first thing. And secondly, at a micro level, the automotive sector itself ought to change and up its game in terms of being competitive, right? Identify markets, increase the skills, being innovative, and of course settle for the new ways of work, which is the so-called new normal.
The government is also in the mix of the revival plan.
Government is on a path of mobilizing various stakeholders so that they work with us to ensure that we implement the economic recovery plan. The reality is that COVID is going to be with us for a very long time. What you have seen is that ministers and deputy ministers are across all over the country engaging various stakeholders to ensure that they work with government, just like they started working with us when the pandemic was declared by the National Command Council. Now what is happening is that a visit of today is the continuation of us having engaged communities, traditional leaders and other sectors, and today is the private sector, to ensure that all of us work together and move forward and implement the economic recovery plan. It will not be possible to implement it if it's done by government alone.
Despite the harsh reality of the economic impact of the virus, the industry is confident of a recovery, but it won't be overnight. Lerato Fekisi, SABC News, Port Elizabeth.
And many sectors hoping that the recovery will be even better than expected. All right, let's look at the markets, and I can tell you the rand recovered a little bit today. It took a hammering yesterday, and that was mainly over concerns about the global economy. The rand as an emerging market currency particularly vulnerable, especially because of the high COVID-19 infection rates seen in Europe. So predictions that could slow down growth. Looking a bit better today, sentiment on the market, although the JSE down just a fraction. And let's look at your main financial indicators.